So it's a pleasure to have Ravi Dharamshi with us. Ravi is the founder and CIO at ValueQuest. He has 22 years of experience into Indian public markets. He manages $1.3 billion in assets and has delivered over 21% CAGR. Prior to founding ValueQuest, he worked with Rakesh Jhunjhunwala at Rare Enterprises, and he helped set up his family office in roles of research and private equity. Without much delay, Ravi, bye, if you can just come and start your presentation.
First of all, I would like to thank CFA Society for giving me the opportunity to present. I think it's a big honor. I think so. CFA Society does really quality events where we get to know a lot. There's a lot of knowledge sharing that is happening, and we are a beneficiary of that too from time to time. Thank you for that. My topic for the day, I was told to present on decarbonization, but I am not a domain expert on the various technologies on the decarbonization front. So I have chosen a slightly same topic, but essentially how to invest in the energy transition that is going to happen. So that is where my focus will lie. So without any further ado, so first I'll just play a little bit of just a small video. I'm not sure if this will play. While the video is playing, essentially the humanity, as we know, is moving away from fossil fuel towards renewables, and this is one of the biggest change that is happening in the way the energy is produced, energy is transmitted, and the energy is consumed. And this is going to bring about a paradigm shift in the way the manufacturing, logistics, transportation, all those kind of systemic things are managed over the next at least few decades. The energy transition is not a new thing. We have moved on from, generating fire from hand to maybe using fire, wood. We moved away from solids, we moved towards liquids. We are moving away from liquids, and then we are moving towards gas. In gas, we are moving away from the fossil fuel-based gas towards factory-produced gases. So energy transition is a natural way of life since humanity. But this is the first time that there is an energy transition that is happening, which is being pushed by humans and where it requires a large amount of investments. All the previous transitions have been more about adding one more form of energy to what was already being used. So this is different because anything that produces carbon emission or gases, which basically we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emission, that's what our objective is. So the agenda and flow, actually I have a very short period and this is a very long presentation, so I'm going to rush through it. But the flow that I want to cover is energy transition. It is an imperative and inevitability. Energy transition, the mechanics and implications of that, and then how big the opportunity is, and then eventually we'll come to the transition playbook for investors. So this is broadly what we intend to cover. The way ValueQuest, just a bit of disclosure, obviously there will be names of companies and all that will be mentioned here, but this is not a recommendation to buy or sell anything. It is just for illustrative purpose, trying to map the market. It is not an investment. Please do your own research. We as a house usually tend to invest thematically. We try and identify which are the themes that are going to do well over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and then try and identify companies within that. So about 2 years back is when we started work on this. Even as a concept, energy transition has been around a long time. In fact, after the crude spike of 1970s, Brazil moved towards ethanol dramatically. That was one of the first ones where people were trying to move away from fossil fuel, but it was not the movement had not gathered enough mass, critical mass, for it to become a global phenomena. Today, it's a different world. So why energy transition? we'll definitely get into the more reason, but the biggest thing is, of course, that we are now, so this is where the Industrial Revolution started, the 1750s, and you can see the chart on the top, how the temperatures have gone up after the Industrial Revolution started. So this Earth is the only Earth, there is no planet B, and we are actually causing harm to it. And in our need for a better standard of living, better life, we are exploiting the resources of this planet, and that is leading to a damage that is being caused to the planet. So there is naturally a need for us to make sure this plan remains, even though Elon Musk might agree with me and there might be a planet B for him, but for all practical purpose, for our lifetime, there is no planet B. So as you can see, the global surface temperature has also been going through the roof. I'm going to rush through this because it's pretty much common knowledge. But what I want to point in this particular chart is that the costs are real. And these are not only the human lives cost, but the dollar costs also are real and they are going up. Whether it is wildfires, winter storm, freeze, drought, floods, all kinds of calamities, the frequency is going up, the damage it is causing is going up. And that is why there is a need, of course. And the thing is, the most susceptible of the nations. So till now, the resources have been exploited more by the developed countries, but the brunt is being borne by entire world, and especially the global south, as the new term has emerged, which is essentially people with less money, essentially. So as you can see, all the countries marked red are the ones which are most susceptible to global climate disasters. So energy has a direct correlation with the prosperity of a nation. There are no countries where energy is low. If it's a low energy country, then it's a poor country. All countries that are on the upper side are the ones where there is a lot of energy and they are rich countries. So what are the drivers of the energy transition? There are many reasons why nations, why us, humanity, should adopt and do the energy transition. But as we all know, principles of capitalism work more efficiently than just altruistic motive. So energy security. Nations, if they want energy security, today we have seen what happened when Russia-Ukraine war happened. The prices of gas in Europe went through the roof. And that was, again, a chilling reminder for the people in Europe that we need to better be dependent on our own sources of energy. Obviously, they don't have natural gas or crude. So that is where the renewables come in. It is not something that is limited to a particular geography. So energy security. Affordability. Commodity-based fossil fuel is actually, it has an inverse correlation. It's a very demand-supply-driven prices. As prices fall, as supply falls, prices rise. But in case of renewables, it's something that can be, there is a learning curve. And that learning curve leads to falling costs. And that falling cost leads to increasing adoption of renewables. So affordability of today, energy produced from solar is the cheapest form of energy that humankind has ever produced in its history. So obviously, I believe in a 20-year horizon, we'll reach a stage, just like we have come to accept Wi-Fi in the Maslow's hierarchy of need below the housing and security. Now there is another block which is Wi-Fi. Below Wi-Fi, there will be energy also. There will come a stage where it will become ubiquitous, and we'll expect energy to be there, available everywhere. And it will not cost for us to make any kind of a economic decision on it as well. But we will reach that stage. We are not there yet. Cleaner energy, obviously, we saw the impact that global warming is having. Reducing carbon emissions, deforestation, and last but not the least, economics. It is actually more economical, and when I say economical, the projects based on renewables will make money, it will yield returns, and that is going to be the biggest driver. Contrary to what we think, that we are trying to move towards a more expensive form of energy, actually it will end up being a more cheaper form of energy, and you will be able to make money on it as well. So these are the drivers of energy transition. But how will we undergo this transition? There are many, many moving parts to it. There are many things that, there are many problems, market problems, transformation problems, political problems. There is policy has to be clear, regulatory framework needs to be there. The interests have to align of various nations. Markets are missing. Financing is not easy. Platforms are not available in terms of exchanges where there is easy liquidity. Infrastructure has to be built. For example, it might be all good to say EV, but today if there is no charger in your building, you're not going to buy an EV. So building that infrastructure, labor, everything is a bottleneck, everything is a problem as of today. And this is the greatest challenge that is facing humanity in terms of making the energy transition. But there are some enablers as well. Markets are evolving, and markets are evolving very, very fast. Last 6 months saw prices of polysilicon fall by almost 60–70%, and subsequently leading to almost a drop of 25–30% in the modules as well. So, and you have seen that the incremental bid that are being made in the solar-based power plants are coming around 2 rupees, 2 rupees 10 paise. So that also, so the prices are falling, the adoption has to increase. Energy independence and security. I mean, I cannot drive home this point enough that countries now, India has one of the biggest deficit, current account deficit, and one of the biggest contributor to that is energy. And if we want to reduce our dependence on imported energy, we have to start producing locally. So for that, we will do whatever it takes. Why is it that we are still buying crude from Russia, even though there is a threat that developed world will probably, kind of look at it negatively? It's because we cannot compromise on it. This is one thing that nations cannot compromise on. So independence and security is very important. Costs are falling in place. Some of the points that I will make are probably repeat, so I will not mention them again and again. Convenience. I don't need to import from other nations. I don't need to depend on other people. And it is beneficial. One thing missing over here is the technology curve. A technology is available, and a technology is also an enabler. So we have all the technology that we need. It's not like we are dependent on big breakthrough happening or something like that. Surely there is incrementally, we need hydrogen to come to a particular cost. We need sodium ion to become a better technology because lithium is in short supply. Those kind of things are there, but it's in a lab environment, sodium ion battery works. At a particular cost, hydrogen works. So all we need to do is get it to a cost where it becomes economical. So the technology that is needed to carry out this transition is already there. It's not like we need to employ PhDs to get this transition started. We are in the midst of a energy technology cost revolution. The prices for solar, wind, offshore wind have fallen anywhere between 60 and 90%, and then some more. So that is the biggest inflection point that is needed for the mass adoption of the technology. So what exactly do we need to transition? These are the various sectors that contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions. Electricity and heat, transportation, manufacturing. These three sectors form probably around 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions that we see. So, some of these are very hard to abate sectors. When I say hard to abate, what I mean is it is not easy to, let's say for example, we cannot have an electric aeroplane. The need for dense energy and for it to sustain over a long period of time is very, very much there. So it's not like one particular technology will apply to everything. There will be all forms of technology that will be deployed. It's called all hands on deck approach. Whatever applies where. If a aeroplane needs biofuel, that's what a sustainable aviation fuel, that's what it will get. If a particular country has abundant sun, then they'll be focused on solar. If a particular country is very windy, they will get wind assets for sure. So whatever is available to you, you will take that form of input to generate your energy. So I believe that energy transition inflection point has been reached. The reason why we were not bullish 30 years back and we are bullish today is essentially earlier this was driven only by a very altruistic motive, which is there is global warming and there is pollution. So we should do this. Very few people actually take calls like that. And people, those who are also arguing for it, go in a jet plane to argue for it. But today, if you see, there is geopolitical advantage you get by going towards renewables. You get technology leadership. You get energy security, justice, costs are lower, and of course, global warming and pollution you get under control. So there are many more things that are in favor of you going towards renewables. So that tipping point has been reached in terms of, we don't need to convince anyone. Everybody in the world is convinced, from governments to companies to general awareness from the public. Everybody is now very sure that yes, we need to transition away from the fossil fuel. So the inflection point has been achieved. What are the implications? So for all practical purpose, fossil fuel has peaked. 60% of the world, which is the developed world, the fossil fuel peak is already there. Only China and India remain. And by some measures, people are saying China will probably peak out at the fossil fuel either this year or next. And we are not talking about 10 years out. So if China peaks out, that will add another 20% to the world. 80% of the world has already seen the peak of their fossil fuel usage. India will probably be one of the last nations to peak out in that sense, but still in the next 10 years, even that is going to happen. So the implication of the renewables, the energy transition, is that the fossil fuel is already peaked out, and you'll probably see a very, very drastic drop in the curve. That's how it tends to happen, that once the inflection point is reached, the acceleration just even further accelerates. So fossil fuel power capex is down 26%, oil and gas upstream capex is down 41%. Incrementally, out of every dollar that is spent on energy, more than 50% goes towards renewable. So that itself tells you that money is now going, which way the money is going. The good thing is renewables are 100x of fossil fuel. What do I mean by 100x? This is a boon for humanity. Humanity has unlocked a giant new energy source. Renewables are obvious and available everywhere. Even if you are massively constrained in deployment, world has annual renewables flows of 100 times of the fossil fuel. So basically, actually speaking, one state in US or half of a state of Texas is enough to generate enough energy for the entire world. So we are not constrained by anything. Of course, there will be constraints regarding deployment from geography to geography and resource to resource, but it is possible, and we can generate 100x of our energy needs. Solar rooftops alone can supply us with the need. So the change of guard from the age of carbon to the age of renewables, what implications will that have? So we used to be fossil fueled, geographically concentrated. Nations or organizations like OPEC could hold us hostage to their rent-seeking behavior. So, but that is not going to be the case in renewables. It is finite and exhaustible. Incrementally, more and more dollar need to be spent to pull out one more barrel of crude. It's commodity flow based, and it encourages power and rent concentration. But now you come to the renewables, it is technology based, there's a learning curve, costs are constantly dropping. With more money going into renewables, the costs will actually keep dropping further and further. And it is abundant everywhere, and so even a poor nation in Africa doesn't need to depend on anybody in, for their energy needs. Sorry, I'm going to rush through. Energy transition is going to change the way the resources we procure from the supply, transportation, storage. It's a fundamental change in the way we relate to all aspects of energy, generation, distribution, and consumption. What is the pace and quantum that we are talking about? The blue bar over here is the electrification. We are today at around somewhere between 16 and 20% electrification, and we are likely to end up with 77% of our energy needs will be met from electricity. There will be 7% odd nuclear, and rest of it, 16% of fossil fuel will still remain. Again, a chart depicting the same thing, the share of various sources of energy. Already, as I mentioned, the light blue bar is essentially the money going towards renewables, and the dark blue bar is towards the fossil fuel. Can this lead to some kind of a shortage in the commodity-based fossil fuel in the short run? For sure it can, because finally it will be supply-driven. If the supply is not increasing, and if the demand sustains, there might be a brief period where the crude spikes, which probably happened last year. Various sources of renewable capacity, biomass, hydro, offshore wind, distributed solar, utility solar. Solar is versatile, scalable, and flexible. It is the backbone of this entire energy transition. If hydrogen has to succeed, solar has to succeed. It is going to be more than 60–70% of the entire renewables basket. We took almost, how many years? First terawatt arrived in 2022, next within 3 years, and the third will take less than 2 years. That is the kind of capacity additions that we are doing. So, and generation, transmission, and applications. So primary energy, solar, wind, other renewables. Carriers will be electricity and hydrogen. And applications will be EV, heat pumps, other non-fossil machinery. We are transitioning through the entire value chain through renewables, electrification, and efficiency. Electrification and efficiency are the other part of the energy transition chain as well. So on the scale of mature, deployable, and scalable technology to R&D, prototyping, and pilot scale, these are the pillars of energy transition. Renewables, how we increase our percentage from renewables in total energy. Then it is the direct usage of RE in the total energy consumption. So how much of quantum of bioenergy is used. Then reducing energy density. This is one of the low-hanging fruits which not many people pay attention to, but by increasing our, by using more efficient equipment, we can actually reduce our energy consumption somewhere between 5 and 10%, and that's a huge number. End-use sector electrification and clean hydrogen production and distribution. But as we move towards the end, of course, those are technologies which are still yet to be commercialized and mass adopted. And then, of course, the carbon capture and the removal methods. How to benefit from energy transition? Coming to the point that we are all here finally gathered for, that was a long prelude to why energy transition is inevitable. But this is what Larry Fink has said. I believe the decarbonizing of global economy is going to create the greatest investment opportunity of our lifetime. And I also sincerely believe that is definitely the case. Let's take a look at what kind of opportunity that we are talking about. These are estimates of various agencies from BNEF to McKinsey to everybody. What their International Energy Agency, everybody has made a guesstimate of what, this is a base case scenario, okay? The present scenario extrapolated a little bit and not a net zero scenario. And what does net zero scenario mean? Essentially, we achieve that 1.5 degree. We limit the amount of temperature increase to 1.5 degrees by 2030. That is a net zero scenario. If we had to achieve that net zero scenario, by 2050, if we have to achieve that scenario, we might actually need more money than this. But this is 3.5 trillion, somewhere between 3 and 5 trillion is the range that most people are talking about. Today, we are spending about $1 trillion. So this essentially is 3 to 5x of the current spend that we are doing on the energy transition. And within this, so it's a cumulative spend of probably 50 to 70 trillion from now till 2050. But bulk of that, 70% of that capex is going to be front-loaded. Is going to happen in next 10 to 15 years. So about 30 to 40 trillion is going to be spent in next 10 to 15 years in going through the energy transition. Non-linear growth. So this is essentially the chart that depicts. The blue line is essentially what depicts how the temperature limiting scenario, if that was to pan out, how it would look like. The cumulative capex. As you can see, from now till about 2035, the capex is a steep up curve. where the money is going to be spent and how much the money is going to be spent. Driver, voltage, digital. Essentially, same thing. There are three pieces to it: generation, transmission, and application. And within that, of course, there are new connection. On the distribution side, there is non-digital and digital breakup of the opportunity. Asset replacement is 19%, new connections, and system replacement. So this is a chart. Look at the first BNEAF 2023 to 30 and look at how the chart is increasing, and whichever scenario comes to pass, there is a significant capex. These are just various scenarios. See, finally it's about estimating what kind of spend is going to happen. For the best case scenario to pan out, a lot of things need to fall in place. So not everybody is talking that we will have that temperature limiting scenario pan out. If temperature limiting scenario pans out, literally it will be blue skies. And again, I'm using a lot of pun over here, but blue skies means pollution free. Investment in electric T&D infrastructure. It's hardening and resilience, advanced technology, expansion, replacement. Okay, the chart on the right, essentially, this is the transmission wires added to the US grid by year. So if you can see the last 30 years, there has hardly been any money that has gone into the wires. All the wires on the grid in US are very, very old. Less than 15% is new. And if you know, a lot of the California wildfires were actually caused by these wires connecting with the trees around it and then catching fire. So these are the biggest reason for the forest fires. Transmission grid is a big opportunity, and not only India, the world is under-invested in it. So just because the opportunity size is big is not a reason why you will make money. For you to make money, existence of a large opportunity is a necessary condition, but not sufficient. It has to be coupled with predictable environment and high entry barriers, which seems to be kind of iffy right now because a lot of things are evolving and it is very dynamic. This is the investment framework that we use: size of opportunity, competitive advantage, scalability, sustainability, good management, and last but not the least, there is a asymmetric risk reward. So opportunity we have taken care of, but what we are trying to focus is that scalable, sustainable, and is there a competitive advantage that a particular company can have in this? So we would like to bet on probabilities, not on possibilities. Large opportunity is not equal to automatic gain for investors. This is about getting the odds in your favor. Energy transition will drive growth across the board, whether new age or old age. Position in the value chain where there is high predictability of value accrual and retention. How do we do that? Let's come to that. So this is a study done where it shows that the variability of return on invested capital is actually the lowest in industrials as compared to technology. Technology has a wide variance in terms of the ROIC. It can be very high, it can be very low, negative also. While on the industrial side, it's mostly positive, and the outcomes are very predictable. So that's the point that I want to make, that industrials have a very predictable outcome. So what lends predictability is the scope for differentiation. Are there entry barriers? Are there stable competitive dynamics? That is what allows the value to accrue. But the stage of evaluation of technology, the technology maturity and the scope for disruption will retain the value. So today, a lot of people have questions about, for example, solar. Solar is developing so fast. There is so much of supply coming in, and technology will keep changing. So how can an investor make money in this space if technology changes so fast and value is not retained? Just an example, we'll come to that, but find something which value that sticks and opportunity that can be captured by few players. This is the market sizing and positioning. I have broken this down into grid flexibility, power generation, energy efficiency, electrification, hydrogen, and carbon. Again, the same thing, hydrogen, carbon, electrification are more futuristic and where the technology maturity is still not there. But if you were to look at grid flexibility, power generation, and energy efficiency, the technology is pretty mature over here. The players are pretty much identified over here. The delta remains very, very high in terms of how the opportunity is going to unfold. Just to give you some sense, first column is the historical spend that's been done. Then is the 2030 base case scenario. In that case, what kind of a delta in investment are we going to see? The growth multiplier. So if you can see over here, for example, solar concentration has the highest growth multiplier of 9. But in absolute terms, it's a very small opportunity. What is solar concentration? Essentially, concentrating the solar energy on one particular spot. Just like when we were young, we used to use that magnifying glass to concentrate the solar energy to burn a hole in a paper. Something like that's the technology we are talking about. That has a big delta, but it's a small in terms of size. But if you look at which are the big ones in terms of absolute size, storage, hydro, wind, onshore, solar, these are all the big opportunity, but along with the size of the opportunity, you have to look at the stage of market evolution and the scope of differentiation. Wherever it says stage of market evolution is mature and the scope of differentiation is medium, that is where, in my opinion, that's where the pot of gold lies for us as minority shareholders to take advantage of. Identify players that are addressing that opportunity, and that's where you will benefit from. Transmission is a key cog in the wheel of electrification. Just to give you some sense, 1 gigawatt thermal coal plant generates 1 gigawatt of power. Or let's say if it has 85-90% PLF, it generates 900 megawatt. But a 1 gigawatt solar power plant generates only 220 megawatt of power. But the grid capacity you have to still build according to 1 gigawatt. Why? Because this 220 megawatt is actually generated in a few hours. It's not throughout the day. So there is a lot of variability. There is a lot of, the duration of generation is very different. The control, the electrons, you have lesser control over. So it is very important that the grid is stable, large enough to take your, you are able to take supply from the source to the grid. So it is easy, so fuel is easy to control, while this is intermittent, limited, and dispatchability is different. Generation side provides inertia. It can have grid start from 0, but over here, natural inertia is low, so their ability to start grid is also on the lower side. So the simple point being that grid is going to play the biggest role in the energy transition, and it is the most important cog in the wheel. One more point I want to make over here is that to set up a thermal power plant, it takes 4 to 5 years, sometimes more also, while setting up a solar or a wind park will probably take somewhere between 12 and 18 months. So your power generation capacity is coming on stream much quicker, while your evacuation with the grid is grid transmission capex takes longer. So you have to actually invest ahead of the curve before the generation capacity comes. The sites and all have been identified. You have to first start, before you choose a site for solar, you have to ensure that there is evacuation possibility from there. So this is a very time-bound opportunity in that sense. Electrification is not possible without the grid. So connecting grid to the renewables, improving grid resilience and energy efficiency, reducing grid environmental footprint, and balancing generation and demand. This is all this is essentially saying that we need a smarter grid, bigger grid, and more efficient grid. There are very few players that cater to this market. That's the best part about it. It's not like there are too many players out there who can build HVDC infrastructure. So high voltage DC grid equipment can be built by very 2, 3, 4 players itself in the world. And it's unlikely that a 5th player will enter in this market. Siemens, GE, Hitachi are the 4 players globally. HV switchgear market, again the same thing, that there are maybe not 4, but 7, 8 players that cater to the medium voltage switchgear. Focus area number 2, energy efficiency. This is the low-hanging fruit that I was talking about. Electrification and renewables, clean cooking, technical efficiency, and avoiding demand can lead to huge improvement from 2% to 4%. That's a huge improvement in terms of energy efficiency. And there are companies that cater to this as well, and that is where our pot of gold lies. Focus area number 3, choose shovel sellers over gold miners. Prefer equipment suppliers. So when there was a gold rush happening in California in the 18th century, many people found gold in the rivers, but the guy who sure shot made money are the people, those who are selling the shovels to the gold miners. And that's what we should be doing. If there is a pot of gold everybody is going towards, sell them lemonades or sell them equipment to dig the gold, and you will make money over here. So energy transition is a large opportunity. Old economy as well as new economy will participate, but old is more predictable than new. Equipment suppliers from old economy will benefit. It's a predictable, high entry barriers and operating leverage business. It also needs, energy transition needs manufacturing capacity. Manufacturing capital goods will benefit. That again is a predictable, high entry barriers and operating leverage. These are some of the players that cater to that opportunity. Some of them are second order effect, not first order derivatives. Old economy equipment like conductors, cables, transformers, turbines, boilers, generators, and some new, some products like compressor, pumps, gears, motors. All of these companies will benefit in a big way. Okay, last 5 minutes, and we are also nearing the end of this presentation. So this is the size of the opportunity in the clean energy value chain from the perspective of India. So raw material suppliers, roughly about $37 billion on the generation side, total $37 billion. Then on the equipment supplier, it's a $61 billion opportunity. On the EPC side, it's a $7 billion opportunity. Operators and asset owners, another $68 billion. But of course, we are saying focus more on the equipment suppliers. And consumers, finances, that's also a big opportunity, $68 billion. One more area of opportunity, we discussed 3 areas. There's an additional opportunity, which is the equipment within the generation plants. Typical electrical content in a renewable plant is far higher than the amount that is required in the thermal power plant. That in itself will lead to more electrical equipment being needed, and the companies manufacturing this electrical equipment will benefit. So coming to the conclusion, energy transition is an opportunity of our lifetime. It's imperative, inevitable. We have crossed the inflection point. It's the most important change that is happening since Industrial Revolution. Energy transition is a multi-decadal opportunity. There are pockets of opportunity where technology has reached maturity. Players are few, and they have the right to win. Those will remain protected profit pools, and hence, which can generate huge wealth for the investors. Which are the ones? Identify areas where there is maximum delta in terms of investment happening. Focus where the value is accrued and retained. Focus on predictability where the entry barriers are low. For example, transmission grids and industrial energy efficiency. And focus on shovel sellers over gold miners. Thank you so much.
Quite a intense presentation. Thanks a lot for that. Till the audience sends in questions, I'll start a few of my own.
Sure.
There are just multiple technologies that are at play, right? There is a lot of research happening, say, from in the space of lithium, in the battery space, right? Or the solar panel space, or there is hydrogen car space, right? So how do you understand the tipping point where to bet on?
Good question. So that remains a challenge. So first of all, you have to put on a hat. Are you a late stage investor? Are you a public market investor? Or are you a VC who's going to bet on technologies? When you bet at early stage, when the technology has not reached maturity, the outcomes can be very, very varied. We usually tend to be late stage investors. We want to see that adoption curve in motion. We want to see that the tipping point has been achieved in a technology before we can bet on it. Where the possible outcomes narrow down. So usually 15% of a particular penetration rate is where that inflection point rise, somewhere between 10 and 15%, where the early beginners have invested money and because of the learning curve involved, the costs have fallen and that falling costs enable new players to jump on board. So yeah, so for example, today you can say solar is a pretty mature technology. Again, I am not saying that there is no evolution happening over there, but today the efficiency lies at around 22% of a solar module panel. We can hope to take it to 25, 26, or in a theoretical scenario, 30%. But it's never gonna be 50% or 100%. So if we are at 22%, I mean, we are already decently mature technology in that sense. So identify technology where money is flowing, identify where the penetration levels have reached a certain scale, and I would say that's where the tipping point lies.
Perfect. When you talk about solar and the energy is not really dense, right? That will need completely different investments in terms of grids, right? But for an energy deficit country like India, right? Is renewables a really realistic possibility? I mean, we saw a lot of investments in COP26, right? But they also announced investments in thermal, right? So for, say, the global south and the Indian space, how do you balance that?
It is, in fact, very more important for the global south and India as a country to start investing in our own sources of energy. Renewables will play a big part. As we spoke earlier, energy security and independence is the biggest driver of why this energy transition is happening. But now add to that fact that you can actually incentivize and people can make money. Why is the money chasing solar? Because there is so much of policy alignment, economics, nations' objectives are also aligned. So everything is pointing to the fact that we should actually adopt more of renewables. So it will be over a period of time. I will not be surprised if our energy import bill at some point of time, maybe a decade later, actually turns positive, where we are actually exporting energy and not importing energy. Why would we not want to focus on such an objective?
Right. With respect to renewables and especially solar, China has gained so much advantage in terms of technology that we can say that we can be self-sufficient and we may not depend on oil manufacturing countries. But then is the globe becoming extremely dependent on China for technology? Is that a threat?
So there are two forces over here. One is the force of the fact that China has been the biggest investor in the renewable technology in the last 10 years. And the scales that they have built on the solar side, on the wind side, is tremendous. The biggest solar module manufacturing company in China would be at 150 plus gigawatt kind of capacity, while the biggest solar module manufacturer in India would be at 12 gigawatt. It's almost a 10x, more than a 10x kind of a difference in the size and scale. Having said that, this is not like commodity like crude, where only one particular nation or that geography has access to it. This is a technology. There is a learning rate involved. There is probably a time period involved where other nations will eventually learn it. In fact, China copied the solar technology from Europe 20 years back. Only thing is they did it at a scale and they drove the prices down. Now, the benefit of that is accruing to all of us because the prices are so low. So it is very difficult for even a country like China to actually extract their pound of flash based on the technology that they have. This is a technology. People will learn eventually. The harder you negotiate, the more other people will say that, okay, I don't want to depend on you, and I will develop my own technology. Or countries like US will say, I'll spend money and get access to that technology. It's okay, I don't need the cheap technology that you're providing. So it is a fine balance. Yes, right now China has a lead and advantage, but it will not remain so forever.
Right. I got one interesting question from Yash, saying that a lot of manufacturing machines which create green energy require a lot of mining, right? So do EV batteries and stuff, right? Is EV really better or worse for the environment?
Good question. I don't think EV is substantially better for the environment. All we are doing is we are moving the tailpipe emissions to factory emissions or to the mining area. So net EVs are not great, but it is probably a one-time exercise where we switch away from the fossil fuel, because eventually we want to depend less and less on the fossil fuel. So and this is one of the largest application of the fossil fuel. So without the change at the end application, it will be difficult to do the change to wean ourselves away from fossil fuel. So it is a necessary thing that we have to do, I would say.
Right. So in terms of, so if you can put your investor hat on, right, and you mentioned about picks and shovel strategy, as well as focusing on the grid, the transmission equipment suppliers, where and which categories or which subsegments does India really have right to win? I mean, do you have listed companies which are really doing well? I mean, you won't talk about companies for sure, but subsegments where our investors can really focus on.
So honestly, we are not a technology leader in this space. But the good part is India has never invested in invested in grid, while US is now 50 years old equipment. So we will probably leapfrog the technology over here and have the best of technology, like we have done in the case of telecom or other places also, where we tend to leave a generation of technology and move to the next technology. So that way, from that perspective, players catering to Indian market will have access to the latest technology. The good part, again, is for us, a lot of these MNC subsidiaries are listed on the exchange. So even though the subsidiaries listed here might not be technology leader, but their parents are. And that actually gives them the right to win over here in this market as well. And increasingly, India is becoming a key, crucial market even for them. So the focus is there. If you just take a look at any of the presentation of Siemens, GE, Hitachi, and you will see that the mention of India is there over and over as a market as well as a production house. So I think good times are waiting even for companies that are catering to the great technologies.
In the interest of time, I'll ask you the last question. What's the role of biofuels in this, right? I mean, there is a section of government policy which is incentivizing this. Logically, it doesn't really sound very carbon neutral, but your thoughts on it?
No, so I think very good question. A lot of people bring the food versus fuel debate in biofuel and question whether we should be, at all using biofuels. But there are certain applications where the requirement of energy-dense fuel is required. And the renewables are not that energy dense, while biofuels are. So from that perspective, and there are certain hard-to-abate sectors which cannot be run on electricity. For example, aviation or shipping. That requires that you have an alternative renewable also available. So biofuels or hydrogen-based fuels have a life of their own. This is a all-hands-on-deck approach. It is not an ideological fight. Biofuel is not, EVs are not net positive, or biofuels might not make sense because of the food versus fuel debate. No, everything has its place. It's going to be a messy transition, and we need to go through it. Even biofuels have their role to play.
Great, Ravi. Thanks a lot for an insightful session.
Thank you so much.
Conversation. Can we have Ravi Gautam to give a token of appreciation for the Achal?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Paul, you go first.